Picture this. Pahalgam, often called mini Switzerland. You've got these rolling green meadows meeting majestic snow-dusted peaks. It's usually idyllic.
Truly stunning scenery. A place people go for peace, really.
But then, April 22nd, 2025, that tranquility was just shattered. Utterly. Gunmen attacked tourists.
And the result was horrific. 26 people killed.
26. 25 visitors from India and one person from Nepal. It's just hard to grasp.
And it really is. And you have to understand, this wasn't just any attack. In the context of the Kashmir Valley, this was the deadliest since the Pulwama bombing back in 2019.
Right. So it immediately ramps up the tension.
Immensely. It throws that whole complex, decades-long India-Pakistan dynamic over Kashmir right back into the spotlight.
Exactly. And then almost immediately you get this, well, this quite unexpected twist.
Pakistan's call for an international investigation.
Yes. Specifically asking for Russia and China to be involved. That makes you pause, doesn't it?
It certainly does, especially when you start hearing conflicting statements coming out of Pakistan itself. It creates this cloud of uncertainty.
So that's what we want to do in this deep dive, really try to unpack this tragedy, sift through the claims from both sides, and maybe get a clearer sense of what's actually going on.
Let's start with the attack itself. The location, Bizaran Valley in Pahalgam.
A very popular spot, right? Known for its beauty.
Precisely. Which suggests the attackers weren't just targeting randomly, they were hitting a place symbolizing tourism and perhaps normalcy.
And the group claiming responsibility.
The Resistance Front, or TRF. Now, intelligence agencies, particularly India's, link them very strongly to Lashkar-e-Taiba.
Lest, based in Pakistan.
Correct. TRF emerged after India changed Kashmir's status in 2019. India sees them basically as a front for Leti.
And Leti has a history. Mumbai, 2008.
A long history. They're designated a terrorist group by the UN, so that connection is key to understanding India's perspective.
The details that came out.
Yeah.
Just brutal.
Yeah.
Wasn't military, it was indiscriminate.
Absolutely. Reports mentioned families, people on their honeymoons.
And even a local pony operator, Adil Hussain Shah, just doing his job.
Shot in the crossfire. It's tragic.
And the reaction was immediate, wasn't it? Even far away, like in Bhopal.
Yes, markets shut down there in solidarity, and protests erupted in Kathmandu, outside the Pakistani embassy.
Then TRF issues their claim. And the statement itself was reportedly quite chilling.
It was. Following that, India's response was predictably strong and very quick.
Prime Minister Modi's statement on April 27th.
Yes, a powerful condemnation. He vowed the harshest response.
And it wasn't just rhetoric. We saw immediate action on the ground.
Security forces launched combing operations, searching the forests. There were also those controversial demolitions of homes belonging to suspects in South Kashmir.
And India's National Investigation Agency, the NIA, took over the case.
Which signals just how seriously Delhi was taking this, a top-level federal probe.
But the response went way beyond just security, didn't it? Diplomatically, economically.
Oh, significantly. The suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty. That's huge.
65 years that agreement has stood.
Exactly. And for Pakistan, reliant on those rivers, it's existential. Their reaction, calling it an act of war, tells you everything.
Then the visa revocations for Pakistani nationals.
Right, leading to that sudden rush across the Attari-Wagah border, people having to leave abruptly.
And severing trade ties. I read that Pakistan's pharma industry relies heavily on India for raw materials.
Quite heavily, yes. Something like 30–40%. So cutting that off has immediate, serious consequences for their healthcare system, potentially. It's a very forceful package of measures.
Throughout all this, India's message has been crystal clear.
Unwavering. They maintain Pakistan is directly responsible.
They mentioned technical intelligence. What does that likely mean?
It usually implies things like intercepted communications, maybe digital forensics, location data from devices, something electronic linking the attackers back to handlers or locations in Pakistan.
An electronic signature, they called it.
Yes. Along with other credible information, India is framing this firmly within their long-running narrative of cross-border terrorism.
Seeing it as part of a pattern, not an isolated incident.
Precisely. A continuation of a strategy from their point of view.
Okay, so let's look at Pakistan's side. Their reaction.
An equally firm but opposite stance. An outright rejection of India's accusations.
Calling them baseless and frivolous.
Yes. And Prime Minister Sharif on the 26th called for that neutral, transparent, and credible investigation.
Which, on the surface, sounds reasonable. Let's get an impartial look.
It does. But then you look at statements from others in the government and it gets complicated.
Like the defense minister, Asif.
Exactly. He spoke to Russian and international media, suggesting Russia, China, maybe even Western countries could lead a probe.
Okay. But didn't he also float the idea of a false flag?
He did, hinting that India might have staged the attack itself. That's an incredibly serious accusation.
Suggesting India attacked its own citizens.
Wow. It immediately makes you question the motives behind the call for an investigation. Is it a genuine search for truth or something else?
And then there was the deputy PM and Foreign Minister Dar, his comments.
Referring to the attackers as freedom fighters.
That caused outrage, didn't it?
Widespread condemnation, to use that term for people who just massacred tourists. It was seen as deeply offensive, legitimizing violence.
So Pakistan wants Russia and China involved. Why them, specifically?
Well, ostensibly, it's about seeking impartial mediators, major global powers with influence.
Russia's ties with Pakistan have been warming up lately.
They have, and China, of course, is Pakistan's long-standing all-weather friend, huge investments through CPEC.
So bringing them in adds diplomatic weight. Maybe acts as a shield against India.
That seems plausible, but then you hear these reports, whispers, really, that Pakistan, maybe with China's help, was working behind the scenes at the UN.
Did you do what?
To water down the Security Council statement condemning the attack.
And did they succeed?
The final statement, released April 26th, was noticeably milder than some might have expected. It echoed the language used after Pulwama in 2019, and crucially, it didn't directly mention Pakistan.
That does raise questions. If you're innocent, why push for a weaker condemnation?
It certainly feeds suspicion that the goal might be more about damage control and deflecting blame than finding the truth.
Especially when you factor in Pakistan's economic situation. They're reportedly seeking a big bailout from China.
Yes, reports mention needing around $1.4 billion. So involving China could be about securing economic support as much as diplomatic cover. It looks like a complex, high-stakes play.
But here's the thing that really strikes me, the internal contradictions in Pakistan's own story.
You mean the false flag versus freedom fighters narrative?
Exactly. How could both be true? If India staged it, the false flag theory, then the attackers weren't freedom fighters.
And if they were freedom fighters acting on their own motivations, then it wasn't a false flag orchestrated by India. The two explanations seem mutually exclusive.
It just doesn't add up logically.
It doesn't, and that's drawn a lot of criticism. One analyst, writing from Moscow, called it sort of a clumsy attempt to muddy the waters, potentially cover up complicity.
Saying the freedom fighter line discredits genuine movements,
Right.
and the false flag claim is just, well, insulting.
Pretty much. It suggests a narrative that's struggling to hold together under scrutiny.
Amidst all this back and forth, the politics, the accusations, we have to remember the human cost.
Absolutely vital. The stories emerging are just devastating.
Like Shubham Dwivedi. His wife Ashanya described him as a hero.
Saying he identified himself as Hindu to draw fire away from others. Incredibly brave, if that's what happened. Her demanding martyr status for him. Heartbreaking.
And Kul Moni's widow, grieving in Mumbai. It brings it all back to individual lives destroyed.
And it's not just the Indian victims. The impact crosses the border.
You mean like China Amraj, the elderly Pakistani man forced to leave India?
Yes. His condemnation of the attack, calling it a murder of humanity, is powerful. And then hundreds of Indians had to suddenly return from Pakistan because of the visa cancellations. Real lives, real disruption.
To really get the context here, we need to touch on the history of Kashmir itself, briefly.
It's essential background. A dispute going back to 1947, partition. Both India and Pakistan claim the whole region.
India accuses Pakistan of fueling militancy there for decades.
While Pakistan says it provides moral and diplomatic support for Kashmiri self-determination, it's a deeply entrenched conflict.
And the Resistance Front, TRF, emerging after 2019 when India revoked Kashmir's autonomy.
That's a key event. India sees TRF, with its Leti links, as proof that the militancy infrastructure supported from Pakistan persists.
So this Pahalgam attack really challenges India's claims that militancy was declining after 2019.
It does. It puts immense pressure back on Modi's government to show they have control and to respond forcefully.
And for Pakistan, as you said, the situation looks very difficult.
Extremely. A fragile economy, the threat of Indian retaliation, the potential water crisis from the Indus Treaty suspension.
Plus the impact on their health sector from the trade ban. They're facing pressure on multiple fronts.
A very precarious position indeed.
What about the broader international reaction, beyond the UN statement?
Well, the UN Security Council did condemn it, calling for accountability, even if the language was seen as softened.
President Trump called it a bad one, I read.
Yes, and the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, was more specific, calling it a horrific Islamist terrorist attack targeting Hindus.
Iran's president also condemned it in a call with Modi.
Right. So there was international condemnation, but the focus really kept coming back to that UN statement and the skepticism around Pakistan's call for a probe.
Like Omar Abdullah, the former J&K chief minister, basically dismissing the probe idea because of Pakistan's initial denials and counter-accusations.
Exactly. It highlights that deep, deep lack of trust between the two sides. It makes any joint or even internationally mediated effort incredibly difficult.
So looking ahead, the immediate aftermath seems clear. Heightened security, diplomatic freeze.
Yes, security beefed up across India, directives to police in Delhi. We saw protests, even that incident with Pakistani flags in Karnataka, counter-protests, mourning in Nepal. The tension is palpable.
On the practical measures,
Yeah.
airspace closures, visa bans, trade suspension, it's a deep freeze.
It is. And Pakistan's gamble with Russia and China? It carries risks.
How so?
Well, if any investigation did find evidence of Pakistani complicity involving major powers, it could backfire badly on them internationally.
But if India's claims aren't substantiated,
Then it's a major loss of face for India. So the stakes are incredibly high for both sides and how this plays out.
it feels like the actual truth of what happened, who was ultimately behind it, is just buried under layers of history, mistrust, and these competing stories.
It often feels that way in this conflict.
Yeah.
And the people caught in the middle, particularly in Kashmir, are left facing yet more uncertainty and fear.
This whole deep dive really brings home just how tangled this all is. It's not just one attack. It's decades of history, geopolitics, human suffering, and these clashing narratives all colliding.
And that call from Pakistan for Russia and China, especially alongside their own contradictory statements, that's really the puzzling core of this immediate crisis, isn't it?
It really is. Which leads me to this final thought, something for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. Given this history, this deep-seated mistrust, these totally opposing stories, what are the real chances that any investigation, independent or otherwise, could actually uncover the full truth behind Pahalgam?
A difficult question.
And maybe even more importantly, what does that kind of persistent uncertainty mean for the future, for stability in the region, for relations between nuclear powers? It's a stark reminder, I think, of why it's so important to approach these complex global events critically, always looking for different perspectives to try and understand what's really going on beneath the surface.